you all for being here. I think this is an extraordinary audience. I know something about each one of you, and I know how extraordinary you are, including the people up here. We're breaking a lot of new ground. We have some big ideas that we want to share with our local community. And what I'm going to share with you now are three big facts that I think are redefining parenthood and are rescheduling parenthood. And the first big fact is our view of conception to birth, this first era of human development, is not at all like what we thought it should be. We have so many new ideas about what's happening during this critical period from conception to birth that it's astounding. We have a whole new encyclopedia of facts about what's going on in the womb. That used to be, of course, a very dark, hidden area. Nobody could tell what was going on in the womb. And there were theories about it all over the world in every culture, but they were usually quite wrong. And even in our scientific area, we've been very slow discovering what was really going on in a mother's womb. But because of a combination of modern technologies, we can actually see inside now on all levels, from molecular all the way up to photography, straight on to the fetus. And you and I are used to seeing the fetus in a way that none of the previous generations who lived on this earth ever could see it. So we live with a vision of the fetus in this amniotic world, floating there like an astronaut, but it's in the water, and maybe sucking the thumb or playing with the umbilical cord or moving around in there. And there are books and videos about this, which we know because we're the first generation of all human beings to have this kind of knowledge of our own life in the womb. This never was possible before. And it makes you, whether you know this or you're still blindfolded about these things. For example, the first big fact that I want to share with you is that the period of our gestation is not slow and gradual at all. It moves at jet speed. You just can't imagine the intensity of change and growth and development and cooperation and integration that's going on in embryology as it's known scientifically. These are all the specific steps of our construction from the very first cell division. We know all about that now. It's incredibly fast. For example, if you look at the heart alone, the heart develops within 30 days of conception. Actually, it starts pulsing on day 21 after conception. Who would ever think that the heart could be constructed and start working in 21 days? I mean, women usually don't know they're pregnant at this point. At 21 days, it begins to pulse, and it establishes a kind of ebb, flow, push, pull kind of circulation. But in only 1 week, more than that, it establishes true circulation. And it will continue perhaps for 100 years, this heart. It doesn't even have valves or compartments yet, but it's doing its job. The heart is working by the end of the 4th week of gestation. What we're just learning about the heart is that it has its own memory, and it's part of the nervous system. This is an incredible, giant step forward in understanding the nature of the human heart. And the kind of intelligence that it seems to channel, or try to channel to the brain, which develops a lot later than the heart, is more like wisdom. And each of us experiences that wisdom, but in a subtle way, and we may not clearly understand that there's a difference in what comes from the heart and what comes from the head. The brain and just about everything else is developing all at once. Not one thing at a time, not from simple to complicated. It's just a tremendous outburst of activity and growth everywhere at once. So the heart is not only growing in that first month, everything else is growing too, including the brain. But the brain will not be finished until long after birth. That has been a great source of confusion in how we think about babies. Scientifically, we've thought that the baby couldn't have enough intelligence because the brain was not working until after birth. So forget about birth trauma. Forget about babies feeling any pain. Forget about all kinds of accidents and traumas in the womb. Forget about communication between mothers and babies in the womb, mothers and fathers and babies in the womb, because there's no basis for it. Just put all that aside. But what we actually know now is that a baby is not at all what we thought it was. Most of what we thought we knew about babies is now obsolete. Over the last 25 years of discoveries, we were just very simple-minded about babies. They have their own complexity. And as far as I can tell, part of their complexity is kind of psychic. They have a source of wisdom and intelligence that comes from somewhere. Maybe it's the heart, but it comes from somewhere because they always seem to be aware. It's like babies don't wait for some future time to become sensitive to what's going on around them. They know, for example, and apparently they've always known whether they're loved or not. How do they know? They don't have their brains yet. And that always prevented us from understanding how babies could be babies, in the sense that we want them to be babies. But we want them to be real and like us, so we start talking to them. Mothers do that, whether it's scientifically grounded or not. They just feel a little embarrassed about talking to the baby. But that's changing, isn't it? 10 or 15 years ago, mothers were kind of shy and embarrassed to talk to babies in the womb. But they went ahead and did it anyway. If they talked to doctors or psychologists, they would have been told, well, there's no point in doing it because the baby has no brains and wouldn't understand you at all. But actually science was wrong. Mothers were right. It is possible to communicate with babies in the womb because they have some kind of special knowing. Don't be confused about the brain. It won't serve as your biocomputer for many months. But there's more than the brain. This is part of the new encyclopedia of knowledge about the nature of babies. So, my first point is this big fact that from the moment of conception on to the birth, which is actually about 266 days. Forget the 40 weeks thing. Doctors usually tack on 2 weeks to their estimate of the age of the baby because they can't know the time of fertility or fertilization. And they settle for that kind of loose designation about how old is the baby. But I want you to know that in reality, if you could start with the moment of conception, you can count the days now. Embryology allows us to count the days when certain things are going to be happening. Like I told you about the heart. Now, if you were a parent, wouldn't you want to know that you have conceived? Now, some women do know that without asking anybody or without making any tests. They just know. So they can pace themselves. And then when they know that at 21 days the heart will already be working, then they're beginning to get a grasp on when parenting begins. What is the usual idea about when parenting begins? Probably sometime after birth, when you have a real baby. It's really breathing. It has eyes. It can see you. We used to think that the baby had no senses. It was deaf, dumb, and blind, even at birth, and couldn't even feel pain if it was suffering. It wouldn't know what suffering was. So wouldn't a parent like to know that there's some kind of awareness present from the beginning? Even if it's hard to explain in scientific terms. We have to get kind of beyond mere science to take account of these facts. But my time is short, so I need to be very disciplined in how I present these 3 points. I've just come back from a speaking tour of Europe where I had hours and hours and hours to talk to people. Number 1, because the period of gestation is so fast, you will miss it if you don't realize that you're already a parent. You'll turn up 9 months late if you think that your job starts after birth. All the facts now tell us that conception is such a crucial, critical time that if you don't get ready for that, you're already flunking on the job, so to speak. You didn't start when you were first needed. It's like a man has to clear up his act regarding his sperm and his lifestyle, his way of life, whether he's drinking or smoking or what he's doing that might affect the sperm and the conception. It's not like he'd go back and do that over again. It is what it is. So you want to move up to the conception and be psychologically present and aware of what you're doing in order to do the best possible parenting. Let me move to the second point. Parents are the architect of the baby brain and body. This is a huge idea, but it's true. It's not the doctor. Doctors can't do any constructing of your baby's body and mind. We think they have a prominent role in pregnancy, but they don't. They're just tagging along after the parents. The parents are where the action is. They're the architects of the baby's body. From the moment of conception, there's a grand architecture, but it needs to be nourished by parents. They have to do their part. If conditions are starvation conditions, if they're surrounded by violence, the whole gestation of that baby is going to be different from what it would have been if there were peace and harmony, security, and love. We now know more about the genes and the environment and the dynamic role between the two. The genes are not in charge. They're not the architects of the body, because the environment tells the genes what to do. And if it's a hostile environment that is in the mother or around the mother, then certain genes get turned off, and the growth of the body and brain of the baby is slowed down and diminished. In other words, the baby is being prepared to live in the real world of the mother and outside the mother. Mothers should know that, shouldn't they? But I don't think they do. I think we operate with the idea that everything's going to be kind of pre-programmed and automatic. That's our view of the genes, but this is not correct. The state of mind and body of the mother is going to control the genes and the growth of the child. If there's love and harmony and peace, the baby will grow differently, will be able to grow fully. It's instead of this, it's this. It's a tremendous responsibility, but it's the way it is. Let me cite just one thing that happens in the first month that determines the quality of your child's brain. It seems to me that every mother, 5 more minutes? Really, did I talk that long? At the same time the heart starts to work, the neural tube starts to close. If it doesn't close right on either end, you get very serious consequences to the brain and the spinal cord. One of the things we know about it is that if a mother's body contains enough folic acid at that time, at the time from birth in the construction of the brain to that day 22, day 23, there will be significantly less birth defects to the brain and the spinal column. This is why we're enriching cereals and things like that, to avoid brain damage. This is happening. This neural tube is closing on day 22, 3, 4. If it doesn't close on time, you have trouble. And so, I'm saying again, wouldn't mothers like to be aware of the fact that they are the architect? They are doing the construction of the baby's brain inside themselves. And wouldn't they be rather prefer to be prepared and to have all the supplies right for the construction of this baby's body and brain? Third point. Babies are powerful communicators. We didn't used to know that, but they really are. And they can communicate both ways. They can communicate to the mother and father, and the mother and father can communicate with the babies. This is a whole new world of consciousness and awareness that is out there for parents that are interested. Not all parents are interested in communicating with babies like this. But shouldn't they know that it's possible? So they have an option to start communicating with their babies or start tuning in and listening to their babies right from start and before conception. We have several new books in the last 10 years where parents tell their own stories of how their babies contacted them before conception. It's a wild, wild new world out there of parenting. But if you didn't know all these things, you might just be in danger of plodding along in a kind of semi-conscious, automatic way, expecting nothing out of the ordinary, and effectively miss the whole first era of parenthood. We're in danger of doing that when all the joy of communication and participation is waiting for us right before conception. Now, is there any time for questions?
What about your fourth and fifth points?
My what?
Did you have 5 things you were going to say?
Three big facts. Gestation is very rapid, amazingly rapid. You can't waste any time getting on board, or you're kidding yourself. In other words, you're a parent de facto. You are actually being a parent and you don't even know it. And so you're probably being a sloppy parent, an unconscious kind of parent, which is a choice that you should have, you should make that choice your way. But to be ignorant and blind is very, I think, very sad. So that's the first point. And the second point is that parents are the architects of the baby's body and brain. And the third point is that babies are powerful communicators. They can reach you, and you can reach them. And this starts at any time you are ready to start, preferably before conception. Yeah, those are the 3 big facts. Okay?
Expand on that last point.
Go.
How do you mean? How does this happen? And what do you do?
Well, give me a specific question.
Like, I'm trying to conceive here.
I think you're a little clever guy.
No, and, it's one of these things like, the month before felt right, but last month didn't feel right. It's all these things, and I've always kind of had a response to stuff. It's, I don't know where the husband's at with all that stuff, but what is there something about that? Is there truth to that? Like, it just, last month was like, actually, first was right. Everyone can know my personal business. But it was like, no, I'm not sure this is quite right now. But the month before, it felt really right, but circumstances didn't work out that way. So, is there something I'm responding to? Because, I really felt it deeply, and I've had that feeling before about other things, and it tends to be right. Like, what about this communication? Like, how do you establish that?
You just do it.
Just keep your
don't ask any questions, just do it.
Well, many people have profound experiences just before the child is conceived, or at the same time. With my son, there was a golden light that came when I was on campus studying, and it's like, what's this? A surprise child. I had no idea he was coming, but certainly knew right at that point. There are incredible experiences that people have with a child that's coming.
When you read these stories, you get inspired. You get the answer that you're looking for.
No, definitely. I had friends that happened to, where they went to the psychic, and the psychic told them separately, there's a soul waiting for you.
Yeah.
They weren't even get married at that point.
Yeah.
And then within a month, they were pregnant.
I think that's the real world. Yeah. That's the actual world. Mm-hmm. But we shouldn't. Not too many of us knew that, and so we proceeded in our own way to do parenthood. And that will always be the case. Parents do what they can do and what they know. Our group is dedicated to teaching and explaining to parents these new big facts. But obviously parenting has been very imperfect in most places. I think especially in modern times. Life is so hectic and confused. Parents are sort of dragged by the feet, bump down the stairs like Winnie the Pooh.
That is an issue. Like, the whole work thing. I don't want to talk about that, but it is a huge stress, deeply stressing. And is that something? Should we just sort of wait till things cool down psychologically? That's what I've been worrying about lately. It's like. But I've been waiting long enough, It's like
you can only do your best,
right?
And lay off of the guilt,
right?
Yeah. Another question?
David, could you say something about some of the research, scientific research that points to some of your conclusions?
That's too big an order for a 30-second soundbite.
Okay.
But I've written about a lot of that in my book, which is on the table here, The Mind of Your Newborn Baby. And I've talked about all the research in this videotape that is also here, that Michael produced, Text the Feature produced. There's a lot of science in there. And I've written over 50 papers, and they're full of references. And any of those papers are available for people interested in the science. I'm working on a book now called Windows on the Womb, Your First 9 Months, where I'll be summarizing all the scientific facts for what I now believe.
David, how recent is it that the straight medical or the main medical associations believed in some of this wisdom of the newborn? It's really hard to believe. Weren't there always some within the medical field that really knew more of the true nature of the newborn and the unborn child?
Big
Or is
question.
it?
Yeah,
It's
of
hard
course.
to believe.
Always, if you go back, I think, to the beginning of man, you're going to find some people who really catch on and seem to know the deeper truth, and there seem to be many other people who just don't catch on until much later. And this is true of medicine, it's true of psychology, it's true of education, it's true of all of us everywhere.
So
yeah.
when most of us were born, there still was the attitude of there's no pain felt by the newborn.
Oh, absolutely.
The newborn does not have a developed brain.
Oh, absolutely.
And there is no...
Opinion
50 years ago.
Opinion didn't change on that front until after 1986.
86, oh my God.
When the research proved that the babies did feel the pain and were dying of shock from surgery where no anesthetic was used. That was 1986. We've been just very ignorant about babies. We need to relearn all the facts that or we need to rethink all of what we thought we knew about